Hi, my name's Jerry Reynolds. I'm the host of the nationally syndicated Car Pro radio show. I have a radio show every Saturday, heard all over the country. Here locally in Dallas Fort Worth, you can catch me on WBAP every Saturday morning from 9 to 11, and then again in the afternoon on KRLD 1080. And what I do is I give people straight talking, honest answers about everything automotive. Let me give you just a little bit of background. Started in the car business washing cars when I was 15 years old at a dealership here in Dallas, Texas. Yes, I'm a native Dallas Texan. I think I may be the last one, but I am one. And I worked my way up to general manager. And then by the time I was 29 years old, I had my very first dealership in Irving, Texas. And then I've had several since then. In 1996, I bought a Ford dealership in Garland, Texas, that ended up being the number one Ford store in America for at least 1 month, but we were number one in Texas for over 7 straight years. So we sold a lot of cars. And then I expanded and had Dodge Chrysler Jeep Ram in Dallas. I had Lincoln Mercury Mazda in Dallas. And I had a Ford dealership in Oklahoma City. But in 2006, I decided to sell them off, and I was still fairly young. I was still, probably a little too young to retire, and I didn't play golf. So I had started this radio show in 2001 when I had dealerships. And the reason I started it was I saw a need for people who needed to understand the auto industry. I've always said car dealers make a lot of things secretive and they just don't need to be. So I felt this thirst for people to understand the car business. And I think unless you'd been in a position like mine, owning dealerships, it would be very difficult to explain it to anybody. So that's what I decided to do. I set out in '01, was supposed to go on the air, in fact, the week of September 11th, 2001. And of course, the tragedy happened in New York, and I put the decision off for 2 weeks. It was just an experiment. I just thought, I wonder if people would listen. I wonder if they would call me and ask me questions. And went on the air on a really lousy radio station in Dallas. At that time, it was Fox Sports 1190. And boy, it had a really bad signal, and it wasn't a very good station. And I was a little bit afraid to do this on my own, so I solicited the help of a name you'll probably recognize, Kevin McCarthy. Kevin had his own radio show for many years on KLIF 1190 and then 570. So we went on the air the end of September 2001, tested it. People loved it. The phones rang. We couldn't keep up with them. And they really appreciated somebody that would tell them the truth, no matter what, about the automobile business. And so thus the Car Pro Show was born. Actually, we called ourselves the Car Guy Show for the first 8 or 10 years until I found out it was an infringement on somebody that had a patent on that. So we changed to Car Pro, and that's where we've been ever since. Just celebrated our 19th year on the air, beginning our 20th broadcast year right here in Dallas, Fort Worth. It became so popular here in Dallas after we moved to WBAP 820 AM in 2002 that other cities started to say, hey, would you like to come to our town and do your show? First one up was Houston, and then it took off from there. Austin, San Antonio, Lubbock, Texas, Los Angeles, Sacramento, San Francisco, Detroit, Cleveland, and the list goes on and on. And I'm very proud of what we've been able to do. I still do the Dallas show on WBAP locally. Only Dallas, that's it. And then as soon as I get through with that, I do the national show where all the other markets join in and call me at the same time. So I do 5 straight hours of answering questions on Saturdays, but we do it in a very entertaining fashion, and I think that's a really, really important piece of the pie. And no matter what, I tell people the truth. We've got a website if you want to check it out. It's carprousa.com. I drive about 100 cars a year, and I review and video with at least half of those, sometimes more than half of those. I've got two other car reviewers that work for me, and they also review cars. It's quite the production. I never saw it growing this big, but it did, and here we are, and I'm glad. Um, I'm happy to be a part of the Empowering Seniors program. I think it's very important. And I talk to a lot of senior citizens, especially on the WBAP show, where that audience skews a little bit more mature. So I love helping senior citizens. It makes me feel good, and I love talking to people anyway. And they're some of the nicest that are out there. At my website, carprousa.com, I've got a list of dealerships that I recommend and I send my listeners to, and they get special pricing and special treatment. The premier show sponsor, first sponsor I ever had in Dallas Fort Worth, was the Five Star Ford family of dealerships. And that is owned by Sam and Tony Pack, and they're dear friends of mine. They've been part of my show now for 15 years. And I know they're one of the sponsors of Empowering Seniors. Great people to do business with, by the way. 4 locations, one in Carrollton, one in North Richland Hills, one in Louisville, and they just built a beautiful new place in Dallas over on George Bush Turnpike. So with that, I want to give you some tips for buying cars. Let's start with that, because every Saturday I hear from senior citizens who are thinking about making a change from a car to an SUV. And there's a lot of reasons why seniors love SUVs. They're very, very popular, but let me tell you just a few of them that can really make your life easier, okay? First is getting in and out of the car. With a lot of cars, they sit low to the ground, and you find yourself sort of falling into them and then climbing out. And that can be very hard on your legs and your back, whereas an SUV sets up a little bit higher and you can sort of slide in and slide out of it. The entrance and exit of an SUV is so much better than it is for a car. The other thing people love, especially seniors, is the visibility. You've got glass all the way around you, and because you're sitting up higher, you can see down that road a lot further, which is very helpful. In case something happens in front of you, there's a wreck or an animal runs out in front of you or whatever, a kid runs out in front of you, you can see further down the road, and that's great. And then the last reason that I think seniors in particular like SUVs is getting things in and out of them. If you've got a sedan, you know when you walk up to it with a heavy bag of groceries, you've got to set that down into the trunk. And then when you get where you're going, you've got to bend over, reach out, and pull it up. And sometimes that's hard on your back. And I've had my share of back problems, trust me. So an SUV, because it sets up higher and the load floor is level, for most people it's waist high or maybe a little bit under that. When you get something out of a shopping cart, for instance, you just slide it over in there, and then when you get to where you're going, you slide it out. So that's one of the big reasons I think seniors really do like SUVs. Seniors tell me that they feel more vulnerable at a dealership. I can certainly understand that. You think about all the different things and what a big decision buying a car is. If you don't want to burden your family and you don't have the cash to pay, you've got to finance it. Those are all things to think about. Some other considerations that you need to really look at is safety. That should be number one. Cars are safer today than they've ever been before, and in fact, there are no unsafe cars. There are levels of safety, though. But like I say on the radio show all the time, if you can tell me what kind of wreck you're going to have, I'll tell you which car is the safest, because some of them are better from side impacts. Some of them are great for rollovers should that happen. Some of them are better for frontal collisions. Some of them are better for back collisions. But just know that today there are a lot of safety features on cars, and they have never been safer. There are some things that also help to keep you safe. A couple of them that I just love is the rear view camera, which is standard in all cars now. That's really helpful when you're backing up, so you don't have to turn around and wrench yourself to get back there. Blind spot monitoring. When you look in your rearview mirror on your side mirrors, either way, if there's a car in your blind spot, it'll warn you. Some cars will go so far as to make a noise, but the main thing is you don't have to turn completely around to look to your right to see if it's safe to change lanes. And then there's parking sensors today that are on the front bumpers and the back bumpers. If you get close to something, it's going to beep and it's going to warn you, and some cars will actually stop you, especially when you're going in reverse. When you're looking at a new car, you've got to look at comfort. I mean, it's like what I talked about with getting in and out of SUVs. It makes a big difference. You want to make sure that the seats fit you well, that the visibility, you're able to see the mirrors, and this is especially important for some people who are short in stature and also tall in stature. And you want to make sure that you've got a tilt steering wheel so you can see over that steering wheel instead of having to look through it. Again, pay close attention to getting in and out of a car. That's something that you want to practice. Now, there's a lot of technology in cars today, and something you've got to be careful of is not getting distracted. And that's kind of hard to do, especially when you've got a brand new car and you're not completely familiar with everything. So you want to make sure that you know your car very well before you leave a dealership. One thing I often suggest to people, because it can be overwhelming with all the gadgets that are in cars today, all the different safety features and ways to tune your radio and navigation systems and all the things that are on cars today, which are wonderful, but until you get to know them, you're going to be taking your eyes off the road, and that's a deadly mistake. You don't want to do that. So get all the knowledge that you can when you take delivery of your new car, but then there's going to be some things you're not sure about. Write those down when you safely can, because I want you to go back to the dealership after you've had the car for a couple of weeks and ask them specifically about those things that you really don't clearly understand. A car should become intuitive. You should be able to operate everything without taking your eyes off the road. So make sure you put yourself in that position.